We personally think climate change is a scary concept, but we also think that there are many more negatives to the idea of climate change than what meets the eye. Climate change not only affects the ecosystem of the world, but also has major effects on the economy standpoint for the United States.
Although policies that withhold stricter regulations upon affecting climate change have been presented and implemented with the intent of positive outcomes, there are certainly many negative variables that may arise from these strict regulations, such as job loss, business failure, and economic downfall.
Implementing regulations on the occurrences of climate change is a fairly new concept in our nation's history. Only during the late 19th century, organizations started to be formed by Richard Nixon, such as the Environmental Protection Agency, which oversaw the passage of the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and the Mammal Marine Protection Act. The increase of these organizations in the first place was due to the growing concern over pollution, conservation of healthy environments, and many more factors that could affect us in negative ways.
There are numerous objectives of the policies for climate change. Some of the main things that these policies attempt to do is reduce pollution, conserve energy, and promote low carbon. One of the other main goals of these policies is to make the public aware of climate change. The government puts out things to make climate change seem like an awful thing, which it potentially could be, but it doesn't go over the things that policies on climate change will affect. While the objectives of these policies might have great intent, the people don't see how these policies and regulations are making it impossible for businesses, particularly smaller businesses, to grow and thrive. With all of the super strict policies and regulations that businesses have to follow, it's hard for small businesses to get enough money to fund the proper equipment to follow these rules.
As time goes on, the issues that have arisen from humanity's pollutants have started to have an increasing toll on everyday life. One important environmental occurrence that these strict rules have put in order in the first place is because of the record high carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere. The heat-trapping nature of carbon dioxide and other gases was demonstrated in the mid-19th century. Carbon dioxide has the ability to affect the transfer of infrared energy through the atmosphere. There's no question that increased levels of greenhouse gases must cause the Earth to warm in response, thus leading to global temperature rise, a declining Arctic sea ice, ocean acidification, shrinking ice sheets, warming oceans, and many more.
Climate change policies are created at the national, state, and local levels of government. The state and local government's regulations must be in line with the national regulations, but they are free to make more strict policies. The Department of Agriculture and Environmental Protection Agency both play a role in overseeing the implementation of climate change policies.
As like any other proposed legislation, it comes with no surprise that the need of backing from the people as well as the government to move forward with these actions are needed. And that is exactly why scientists, the people that gathered the evidence in the first place, try to persuade everyone that climate change is actually happening and what can we do about it to ensure a reliable future for our future generations.
The policies and regulations work in the United States by limiting the amount of pollution businesses put in the world, as well as encouraging civilians to cut down on their use of fossil fuels. Some examples of this would be to use electric cars instead of gas cars, turn lights off when you leave a room, or carpool to work or school instead of using your own car to drive just yourself. They promote these things through the media, advertisement, and speeches about climate change.
There are many reasons that these policies are created. There are different short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes that we are hoping to achieve with these policies. Short-term outcomes include less pollution and health risk. Some intermediate outcomes would be better agricultural conditions and endangered species beginning to thrive again. And long-term outcomes could include the conservation of fossil fuels, less natural disasters, and better living conditions for all. As you can see from these predicted outcomes, everyone is expected to receive some benefits from climate change policies, such as better living conditions and diminished strength, magnitude, and frequency of natural disasters. However, we won't receive all of these benefits immediately, and these policies will be a burden for some. For example, these policies could have a negative effect on factories and oil or gas companies. Too many intense regulations could make it harder for businesses to feasibly produce their product. Companies could go out of business and many people could lose their jobs. These impacts would take effect immediately and would burden our economy.
These policies are also being made in an attempt to improve the health on Earth, and with the improvement of the health on Earth comes the improvement of everyone's health that lives on the Earth. By getting the pollution out of the air will be cleaner, which will improve the life expectancy rates of everyone on the Earth. Animals and different species will also be able to thrive and not go extinct like they are currently projected to in the future.
As stated previously, there are many positive and negative outcomes to policies that might be put in place to control climate change. And to add to that list, some more positive outcomes could be that new technology could be invented. The reason that new technologies could be achieved is because, for example, if using gasoline for cars were to be banned, of how little we have left of it, then people will and already are today trying to invent these electric cars that could be ran by the power of the sun itself. Another positive outcome would be that the world itself would be a healthier environment, because the more pollution and other pollutants that affect us, the sicker the world will be and will inevitably not be able to support us anymore. But of course, there will be costs that will arise, such as economic downfall, and the reason this would happen is because if we were to outright ban any pollutants that affect the climate greater than a certain limit, then the markets for these certain pollutants will also crash, leading to an increased unemployment surge.
The outcomes of these policies have the potential to benefit everyone, but there is a cost. Policy regulations will cost the government and businesses lots of time, money, and resources. The government would need to find a way to fund and staff the implementation and enforcement of these policies. The businesses and companies would need to find new ways to produce their products that are in line with the new regulations. This will result in higher prices for consumers and even some oligopolies of products.
Fundraising has been coming in for climate change since 2008. This started because President Obama was a big believer in climate change and a big advocate for making climate change a thing of the past. Funds continue to come in from many different places, like the government and some private groups that fundraise to get rid of climate change. The timeline for this could be infinite, just until climate change isn't a worry for our country anymore.
Many groups try to influence climate change policies through lobbying, amicus curiae briefs, or even just finding more people to support their cause. Proponents of climate change policy would be the Environmental Defense Fund, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, and Environmental Protection Agency. Opponents include the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity and major corporations like ExxonMobil. They each have different missions and want to influence policy in ways that will benefit them and help them achieve their goals. This causes a lot of differing opinions in Congress, which can result in gridlock.
This policy is pretty scalable by the support of funding based on what the government sees fit. The climate change policy is very flexible based on the state of climate change. If climate change goes down, then the government might not be as strict on certain things, or if climate change gets worse, then the government can become more strict on public policy related to climate change. These policies could be transferred to other governments around the world in order for the whole world to be better protected against climate change.